Everybody, my name is Elias Toon, and I'm with the Maricopa Association of Governments. I'm an air quality project manager, and I work on a variety of different projects, including the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, where I'm serving as the project manager. I also work on state implementation plans, as well as some exceptional event demonstrations and work associated with the development of state implementation plans. So today I'm here to talk about the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. Forewarning, I will apologize to people who keep hearing my spiel. As Anne said, we're very busy trying to get the word out. There are some new slides, so I'll keep you at the edge of your seat. Not the exact same presentation you may have heard last week. But yeah, hoping just to take people through the program. It is quite complicated. And so if anybody has any questions along the way, please feel free to stop me. Always happy to answer questions as we go along and also at the end. Ready for me just to dive in, Anne?
Yes, go right ahead.
Awesome. Just make sure, can everybody see my screen moving? Awesome. All right. So just to give a background on the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program, so this funding stems from allocations that were in the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, where $5 billion was set aside to support climate action planning and the implementation of local greenhouse gas reduction strategies. So from that allocation of funds, EPA designed the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program as a two-stage grant program. So the first was the issuance of planning grants via formula allocation to different states and municipal, metropolitan statistical areas and tribal native nations and territories to create climate action plans at the local level. Then $4.6 billion was set aside for competitive implementation grants, which we'll get into later in this presentation. So I've cut out a lot of the history here. Essentially, the Maricopa Association of Governments applied for the implementation grants. So I'm going to refer to that as phase one. And so that's the grants to develop climate action plans for the region. And MAG was awarded $1 million to plan on a 4-year planning cycle for the Phoenix Mesa Chandler Metropolitan Statistical Area, which encompasses all of Maricopa and Pinal County. So from that, the first deliverable is a priority climate action plan, and the deadline that we're working towards right now is March 1st, when that priority climate action plan is due. So taking a step back to look at all of the deliverables that are due under these phase one grants, the first is, as I mentioned, is that priority climate action plan, which is really just a slimmed down version of a climate action plan. It's not going to have all the elements that a typical climate action plan you may see from many of the municipalities in our area, such as Phoenix, Tempe, Avondale, Mesa, Scottsdale, who have already, developed wonderful climate action plans for this area. The priority climate action plan is not going to be that in-depth or that comprehensive. So the first one is really just a quick stab at using a lot of federal data sources and trying to put together a synthesized list of near-term implementation measures that we can put into place. So that's going to be the first deliverable that I mentioned that's due March 1st of 2024. The second is going to be a comprehensive climate action plan, and that is going to be more similar to those more comprehensive plans that we were just discussing. There's going to be a lot more deliverables, and we're also going to have a lot more time to plan for that. We're on a very accelerated timeline for the priority climate action plan, trying to put that together in just 6 to 7 months. Whereas for the comprehensive climate action plan, we're going to have 2 years from grant issuance. So we're going to have all the way until summer of 2025 to work on that plan. Lastly is the status report, which is the third deliverable that's required. That is due at the end of the 4-year cycle. So we're targeting summer of 2027 for that deliverable. And that's really just going to be a recap and update to anything in the CCAP. So that's just going to be an update on where the plan is. Did we actually implement any of the measures in the plan? Are we seeing the reductions? Are we on the right glide path for those projections? Have there been any substantial updates? Are there any new funding opportunities available? How has our workforce development goals kind of played out throughout the plan? So that's the topics the status report's going to generally touch on and provide just kind of a recap and look back on how we did over this 4-year planning cycle. One element that I did want to touch on is the quality assurance project plan. It's not an explicit deliverable under the project, but it is kind of been a little bit of a stumbling block for many people trying to develop these plans. And so a QAP is required under federal law, and it is just a document that details your quality assurance and quality control procedures on how you're going to generate, collect, and interpret data for your plan. Fortunately, MAG has been working over the last couple of months to get this QAP approved, as we are not allowed to generally work on greenhouse gas emission inventory development until that QAP has been approved by EPA. This Monday, we were notified by EPA that EPA Air Resources Division has approved our QAP. We're still waiting for the signed version to get to us, but we have been notified that that has been approved, and we are in the top 25% of the nation to get that QAP approved. So we're really excited to get a jump on it and start to work on the greenhouse gas emission inventory portion of the PCAP deliverable, and really put together a good inventory for the area. So jumping into some of those explicit subcategories under the PCAP deliverable, the quality assurance project plan identifies 3 different data sources we could use for that greenhouse gas emission inventory. So we kind of left our options open. And so it kind of generally goes from locally derived data sources up to those national data sources. So the first is trying to rely on any existing locally derived emission inventories. And so in our area, our QAP heavily leans upon any existing inventories that have been developed by the Maricopa County Air Quality Department. And so they have a 2020 GHG inventory that we're intending to rely upon. At the time, we wanted to leave our options open in case that inventory didn't work out or wasn't approved. And so we also included the potential to use any emission inventories derived at the state level, as the state has also been awarded funds to develop a similar climate action plan under the CPRG program. So we left that option available if there were any state developed inventories. And then lastly, we also included EPA's kind of template boilerplate language on deriving an inventory using federal data sources. So that option is also available to us as we move forward. If any of the previous inventories are, found to be deficient for meeting the requirements of the program. The second is the quantification of GHG measures. For this, MAG will be identifying compiling greenhouse gas emission reduction measures to include in that synthesized near-term list of emission reduction measures. What we have been asking is for any eligible entities who intend to pursue those phase 2 implementation grants from EPA to please send those measures to MAG. We will also be trying to reach out to entities that we believe may be pursuing the grants to have sit-down meetings with them and try to see which measures they may want to include on the list. And this is a really critical step in this process, because if a measure is not on the list for either for an eligible climate pollution reduction grant priority climate action plan, it can't be pursued under phase 2. So for this region, if an eligible entity wants to pursue a measure, it either needs to be on the Maricopa Association the list that the Maricopa Association of Government is putting together for the region, or it needs to be on the list that this state of Arizona's Office of Resiliency is putting together for the entire state. So MAG is asking for those eligible entities to send those potential measures to us to put on that regional list. And we have put together a template for that. So anybody who wants to use that template, you're more than welcome to do that. And otherwise, you're not required to use that template. It's just a tool. And, we can have just more verbal discussions or leverage existing tools and descriptions and say your climate action plans or sustainability goals. And I'll touch on who those eligible entities are a little later. It is a bit nebulous, but I will touch on who those entities were looking for those measures from. Thirdly is the development of the low-income and disadvantaged community analysis. So this is an analysis of those historically disadvantaged communities within our region, where those communities lie and how they may benefit from the implementation of measures on our list. So under the work plan, we are required to either use the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool or the EJ Screen tool. These both kind of work on different parameters and different spatial resolutions. So we're currently evaluating which of these tools may work best for us. We are currently looking at the Climate and Economic Justice Screening tool, as we already have some pre-existing data sets that have been derived using that tool for some other projects. And so I've included a map here that shows some of those existing data sets that have been clipped to the CPRG region. And as you can see here in this color ramp that goes generally from white to darker blue, you can kind of see where the census, this is at the census tract level. So you can kind of see at the census tract level where these communities are. And those numbers generally align to how many categories are exceeded for the threshold. And so this tool has a lot of different socioeconomic and environmental parameters in it. And so you can kind of see on the right-hand side, it's a little bit hard to read. Sorry, I was trying to blow it up. But this tool looks at a lot of different things, such as rates of diabetes among certain members of the population, the members who may have asthma, the locations of leaking underground storage tanks, access to transportation. A lot of different parameters are included in here, and associated thresholds have been derived at different percentiles, say 65 to 90% for those associated categories. So if those percentiles are exceeded, they're considered impacted for that category. Excuse me. And so that's what these kind of track level GIS data files are showing you here, is that the darker categories would exceed more categories, while those lighter or white polygons will be where you're not seeing as many categories exceeded, but still at least one. And so as we move forward, how we plan on using this tool is just for the identification of where these populations are within the region, but then also as we develop our benefit analysis of how the implementation of measures on our list may impact or in a positive or negative way the communities that live in these areas. There is also another element that I'm not going to discuss. It's just the review of authority. I think most people consider that the boring element. That's just more the legal, who has the authority to implement a lot of the measures. So that'll be another element that we'll include in the plan, but that's mostly of, like, say, who has the authority? Is it the state, the county? Our municipalities have the authority to implement these different measures, just so everybody is clear on what things are achievable and not achievable. As we know, things that may need state level legislative approval are on a much longer time horizon, while things that can be implemented at the county or municipal levels may be able to move a lot faster with those approvals and implementation schedules. So that review of authority will kind of help to distinguish those and also provide some transparency on the timeline for those implementation of those measures. Moving on to the community engagement strategy. So to kind of get the word out about this plan and also to receive feedback on to include in the plan and make sure it's comprehensive and representative of the region, we've kind of identified 4 different strategies to coalesce around. And so as Anne previously mentioned, one of those are bi-monthly update meetings through the MAG Rose Workgroup. So if anybody is interested in attending those, and hear me talk a lot more about this topic, feel free to reach out to me, and we'll definitely get you on the list for that, where we'll be just giving more frequent updates on the program. The second is a community survey that MAG launched to try to understand the values and priorities of the region as they relate to climate and resiliency and the environmental challenges we face. And so that survey is about 17 questions, and it's now live. We're intending to run that through November 30th. Hopefully you've seen some inkling through our social media strategy and outreach efforts on that survey. And so that's available in both English and Spanish. And so we're really looking to increase engagement with that and get a lot of great responses. So far, we've got about 800 responses on that survey, and we're really looking to get a lot more responses on that as we move forward through November. So I'll touch on the survey a little bit more on the next slide. But yeah, we're really looking, that's going to be one of the potential asks of anybody on this call who wants to help us out with this plan and contribute, is really getting the word out about that survey. So the third item for our strategy are to hold public meetings. So those public meetings, we intend to hold them in or near those low income and disadvantaged communities that we just previously talked about. So we're trying to evaluate those census tracts and potential meeting locations that could be within those impacted areas to try to really increase our outreach and engagement in those areas. Our target for holding those events are in the November to December timeframe. So please keep your eye out as we work forward. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll be able to push that out and start holding those events and getting the word out. Those are going to be really fast turnarounds. So we're also planning on having targeted mailers or door hangers or something to get the word out. We're currently working with Lane Terlever, who we've brought on as a community engagement contractor to help assist in that outreach and the deployment of and facilitation of those meeting events. And the last is just general coordination with the Arizona Governor's Office of Resiliency and other CPRG planning grant recipients. As I generally touched on earlier, there are other CPRG recipients in our region. So the state of Arizona also was a recipient. The Pima Department of Environmental Quality was another recipient of a CPRG planning grant, as well as the Gila River Indian community, as well as the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community are also developing CPRG related plans. So all of them are in attendance at these meetings moving forward, and we're hoping to kind of coordinate and share resources and really develop a solid foundation for climate action planning moving forward in the state and the region. I really wanted to help pump up the survey. So as I mentioned, it runs through the 30th. We've developed kind of a social media distribution toolkit for people to use if they want to help us get the word out about the survey. And so that toolkit, if you're interested, feel free to touch base with me and I can touch base with Anne about trying to get that out. So we came up with some sample emails, newsletters, social media posts in both English and Spanish to show examples of how you might be able to reach out to members of your community. So you can take those and modify them to your own ends to however you feel is best to reach out to constituents or members of your various areas or boards, committees. And so we've also included different graphics for social media, so different sizes for whichever social media sites you may use or your own websites. And we've also included QR codes for anybody who's interested in using that as a resource to get the word out about this survey. So we haven't set an explicit deadline for people to send to us. We know a lot of people are on different planning timelines and also have different resources that they can deploy for this. So we haven't set an explicit deadline to make sure we don't try to cut anybody off. That being said, we are currently working to develop that list in the near term. So working into early December is where we're really hoping to start finalizing that list. And our hope is at the beginning of January to have a draft of these deliverables out for the public to review and see. And so in order to meet that March 1st deadline to make sure we can get through that input from the public as well as opportunities to try to make it look nice and translate it. We kind of need those in the near term from any eligible entities who may want to submit those to MAG.
Sure.
In terms of what type of justification is needed at this point, even if it's just a hypothetical, a thought that you may have, we want to hear it so we can start assisting you. We haven't received any from any eligible entities for our list. So right now we are just reviewing existing climate action plans and national and federal data sets and resources to see which ones we may need to put together like a hypothetical list, because we want to make sure we can put a list together if since we're not receiving any thus far. So those are kind of the tacks we're taking. And we're also intending to reach out, as I mentioned, to eligible entities we think may be pursuing the grant to have more explicit sit down with them. But yeah, at this point, even if you just have an idea, a similar program you found that another entity or state does, that gives us something to work on and to move forward with. But as I mentioned, we did develop that template, which can be sent out at the same time as the toolkit. If anybody wants to see the type of information we've kind of requested currently, things such as the name of the measure, where it would target, what type of CO2 reduction are we talking about? What are the costs that you're thinking you might apply for so that we can try to derive like a dollar per ton reduction from those measures? What type of tool you use to derive those CO2 emission reductions? And so those are some of the type of information you can apply. Those of you who may be new or may not be as aware on the implementation grants and those NOFOs that have been put out, let me just cruise through those real quick to give you a background, and then we'll turn it over to Phil to really give you the nitty gritty on what's actually going on in the region for these phase 2 grants. So as I mentioned before, there's $4.6 billion set aside for implementation grants by EPA. And so of those 4.6 billion, it's been split into two different programs. So one is a general competition that anybody can apply to, and 4.3 billion has been allocated to that competition. And the deadline for that is going to be April 1st. For those of you paying attention, that is only 1 month after the PCAP. So as Phil was mentioning, this has to be a parallel process. It cannot be, you cannot wait until the PCAP has been submitted to develop this application. It's not possible. So they definitely need to be developed on that kind of dual track. The second is a competition that is only available to tribes and territories. And so they have 1 additional month to put those applications together, and $300 million has been earmarked for that competition. Tribes and territories are allowed to apply under the general competition, so they can double dip and apply to both if they have the resources and capacity to develop 2 different applications, but they would need to have their application in by the April 1st deadline. So we haven't heard of any Native nations within our region who are planning on applying for both or under the general competition, but just be aware that is an option that is available if anybody wants to pursue it. As I mentioned before, who actually is an eligible entity? So people who can apply for these funds are states, municipalities, Native nations, air pollution control agencies, or lead planning organizations for CPRG, such as say MAG or PDEQ, or as hopefully Phil will dive into, is a potential coalition of eligible applicants, which can definitely make your the scope of the grant larger, the more money, and more impactful at a regional scale as opposed to just, I'd say, like the local or municipal level. Um, there is currently no eligibility for local organizations or NGOs or businesses to apply for this grant. So if you're interested in potentially pursuing measures, I would highly recommend identifying either one of these eligible entities or get plugged in with a coalition that is being formed to help inform that list of measures that's being developed. Some of the sectors that can be addressed are listed here. Those range from electrical power all the way to agricultural and natural and working lands that can be addressed for these implementation grants. I think I already hammered it over the head, but these measures have to be in the list that's included in a PCAP. So we're looking forward to working with anybody who wants to send those measures to us, and also reaching out on our own to entities to develop that list moving forward. And just real quickly, those can be new measures, expansions of existing measures, or partial funding. So you can come up with something brand new that isn't being done in your region, or say you could take something like the Maricopa County Air Quality Departments work with, say, fireplace replacement program, and you could expand that program to a larger region or a bigger scope, and you could fund just that portion of that program with new money. Or you can do partial funding, where if you've already identified funding from another federal or local source, then you only need a small portion to actually complete the measure. You can also pursue funding for just that portion that you need to complete the measure. EPA has put funding tiers on here. I won't belabor this. The only thing I will point out is that these grants can get as large as 500 million. However, if you look in the bottom right-hand corner, that the anticipated number of awards for the entire nation is just 30 to 115. So there are going to be a lot of people who potentially will not receive these grants. So a lot of great work is going to go into this program, and we are hopeful we can have competitive applications put together in this region, but there are a lot of regions across this nation that will not be receiving funds for this program. And there's a general scoring criteria that's put on the webpage. A lot of different criteria is up there, so you can see which ones are most impactful, where to focus your efforts. And EPA has also provided some templates for sample cover letters, work plans, and budgets to help make it easier for people to apply for these funds if they want. So before I turn over to Phil, just how can you assist MAG with CPRG is please help us get the word out about the survey. It runs through November 30th. If you are an eligible entity, please consider sending us your measures or at least touch base with us and let us know that you're pursuing measures. Thanks, Nancy. You and Phil are on our list. And we'll be touching base with you to sit down and get your measures that you're identifying on our list. And then great segue into Phil is start having internal and external discussions on who's going to apply within your organization or municipal structure for this grant, and with entities like Nancy and Phil who are kind of leading up the coalition efforts. So just general contact information for me, and I'll stop presenting and let Phil take over.